look at companies like Amazon, where you can track, okay, this is where my package is, this is when I'm going to get it delivered, etc. So even the small businesses are getting held to that level of transparency and being able to provide that information. So as they grow, they're needing to shift off of these, QuickBooks solutions and Excel spreadsheets and get something that's a little bit more centralized so that they can provide the insight that, they're being held to, and that's expected from the customers at this day and age.
It's sort of like they're at this inflection point where they got to where they got with QuickBooks or whatever their sort of base accounting system is. And now they're looking for ways to really scale and integrate the operations a bit more. So they've grown just enough to where they've sort of outgrown QuickBooks or whatever their base accounting system is. Here's a question. I knew we were going to get asked this, but I didn't know how fast we'd get asked this question. But we might as well get out on the table now, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering this. But this is from David on LinkedIn. David says, what is your definition of small, medium, and large when it comes to these sorts of enterprises? Nate, what do you think of this? I always struggle with this definition because I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but how would you describe small versus mid-size versus large?
I think we can go, if we're talking about the looking at it in the perspective of number of employees, I think we go from anywhere from 50 employees for a small business up to a medium-sized business, about 200 to 300 employees. And then again, that's a little bit deceiving because there's a lot of organizations out there that can make a lot of revenue with a small amount of employees. I think also we talk about small businesses anywhere from about 10 million to 100 million is kind of that small to medium sized business. I hate to throw numbers out there, and we I think you'll probably agree with this, Eric and Jordy. It's really kind of kind of your best guess as far as how you would define those, but that's traditionally who we work with for the most part. But then we see some organizations that are in the 200 to 300 million that are still kind of in their infancy. So it's really more the organization by organization way to look at it.
Yeah, what industry you're in has a lot to do with it. You could have a number of employees too. A lot of times that's a better indicator, because you could have a company with 10 employees doing a couple $100 million in revenue because you're a distribution or some sort of low margin company. So it's a little misleading. Revenue alone is a little misleading without looking at employee base. We do have one thing I'll share too, just speaking while we're on the topic of what small versus big is in terms of business size. We actually have a free small business assessment that we offer to companies that are under 75 million in revenue. So I'm not saying that that's the hard and fast rule. I tend to agree. It's like under 100, I would consider small. 100 to maybe half a billion might be mid-size, and then once you get above 500 million to a billion and above, that's where we would consider that larger enterprise. But if you'd like to do that free assessment, by the way, since I brought it up, if you scan the QR code right here on the top left side of your screen, if you're a small business doing less than 75 million in revenue, we do a free technology assessment for you in terms of figuring out what your path forward might be, what some of your options would be. It's a tech agnostic approach. So scan the QR code if you want to learn more about it. And if you're listening to this after the fact, you can check out the QR or the links in the description field below. So I'll leave that up for a second and let you scan that and check out that assessment and schedule time to do that. So back to some audience questions or comments here. This is from Matt on LinkedIn. Matt says, I can see the pain of scaling manual processes is definitely a big trigger. So definitely can relate. It sounds like he can relate to that comment there too. And here's a question. I'll start with you on this one, Jordy. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, what are some signs that a business has officially outgrown QuickBooks or Excel? So when you've worked with some of these smaller companies that have had, some of the challenges they've had, and they've come to us with a lot of times they come to us knowing or recognizing that they have the pain already. But what are, some of the signs that you see or that our team sees that they might have outgrown their systems?
I think just having an understanding of different areas within your organization. So one example I think of is, a distribution company, them not having full access to their inventory availability. They're having to click around to different areas to try to track down, what do they have on hand, what's available, and even knowing when it will be available if it's not currently available to their clients. So just having to click around and look at many different, Excel spreadsheets like Darian mentioned, or even not being able to fully trust that their data is correct either. Once you start scaling very quickly and it's very manual, it's much more difficult to ensure and be able to trust that your data is actually correct and that you can make informed decisions based off of that. So the scalability definitely is a big piece that kind of lets them know that QuickBooks or Excel is starting to get a little bit outgrown. You have maybe Deb that owns this one Excel spreadsheet, but she only has a certain amount of hours in a day. So once you start to scale past that availability that she has, that's another really big sign.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So first of all, I'm curious to hear from the audience. For those of you that are working for owners of a small business, what kind of technologies are you guys using? I'd love to hear just sort of your general lay of the land situation. It's always helpful to hear where others are starting from and, what sort of pain points you might be facing as it relates to the systems you have. So drop in the chat just any feedback you have on your current situation as it relates to systems you're using and signs of outgrowth or pain related to those systems. But while the audience is answering that question, Nate, how do the needs and challenges of small businesses differ from the mid-size and larger organizations? Because I think a lot of what we're going to talk about here and what we have been talking about so far today is relevant whether you're a small company or large company. I mean, there's some certain things that is sort of universal across company size, but what are the things that are different? In terms of a smaller company that's about to go through an ERP implementation versus a larger one. What are the big differences?
Well, I think you can break it down in two different ways. And I think, first of all, it's the challenges that lead you to needing to change for the ERP. And that it really, I think the biggest thing that we see is the lack of ability to scale. So you have, again, a lot of manual processes being chased down, and your labor pool is just getting to the point where you could continue to throw people at the problem, or you could get technology and you could start to address it that way so that you scale using technology instead of just adding bodies to the problem. I think when we go to an implementation, the biggest challenge is just having the right resources and having the right amount of resources to dedicate to this change. It seems that a smaller organization, as opposed to a medium to large organization, you have people that are a lot more specialized. So you have a lot more ability to put resources on these projects and have their expertise really dedicated to the project. When you have small and medium-sized businesses, you've got a lot of people wearing a lot of different hats, and they've got their day job. We always go back to, you have your 9 to 5 responsibilities and you're trying to do these implementations. So it seems like really the smaller and medium-sized businesses usually tend to know a lot of what they're doing. So it's really a nice luxury that you have, in the sense that they know a lot. If you're in a small and medium-sized business, just by the nature of your business, you know a lot of what's going on throughout the entire organization. You're not really siloed. But on the flip side, you got a lot going on, got a lot on your plate, and then to try and add a technology implementation makes it really difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point.